So I do have an honor to welcome here Molly Dhlamini to come and join me. Certainly, you can give a very marvelous round of applause. Oh, so Molly, you can just come through. And Madalitso, Zililo, Phiri, the man who has crisscrossed the African continent, moving from Malawi to Mozambique, all the way to Brazil. I think it's all about also the geopolitical dynamics that we're experiencing in the world. So welcome, say indeed. And of course, Prof. Paul Zilungisele Tembe. Your chair is waiting for you, Esther. And you know what? I tell you what, ladies and gentlemen, he can speak Mandarin. And we know with China's influence in Africa, this is a repository of knowledge, and you can really tap to impose this. So it gives me such an honor and a privilege to really dissect quite a very, very emotionally charged film. I'm going to start with you, Molly. Just your thoughts. I mean, a lot of us, and in fact, I was seated to you. I'm going to expose your secret. I think you were on the verge of really shedding a tear or two. You're very emotional. Maybe just first of all, your thoughts about this film, Reparations, a very big issue.
Yeah, it's an emotional issue. Thank you, Khaya, for the introduction, and thank you to Brics Africa TV, Ayanda, for organizing this. It's timely. It's the African Union theme for the year. And last week, I happened to have gone to Ghana to attend a conference about reparations. So for me, this is so timely. And so for me, the first impressions are, it's time. It's time we do it, and we must do it now, and we must not postpone. We have been too shy to talk about reparations because we wanted to fit in and to say we are good boys and girls. We can pay our debts so that we can fit in the current global economic system that does not favor us as Africans, or that does not favor the South, whether it's Latin America or it's Asia. Yeah, because of the past colonial history or apartheid history. So for me, what this says is that it's time, and I'm glad that even the Africans in the diaspora are galvanized to push for this. And it's not taboo that somebody must pay. And Germany did pay to the Jews for Holocaust. Yeah, and the colonizers must pay.
Certainly, Molly, it's non-negotiable. Let me come to you, Madalitso. I mean, quite a very staggering amount. I think it's about 50 billion euros. That's the amount that has been quantified. Do you think it's sufficient? Because, I mean, if you talk about the uprooting of the people, the loss of culture, the loss of heritage, moving to the other parts of the world, and also subjected to very horrendous conditions. So do you think that's quite a very sufficient amount?
Thank you, Khaya, for engaging me and for that question. When we think about reparations, I don't think about sufficiency. When I think about the subject, it's more about, in my work, I use two concepts. It's world making and repair. So it's those two things. Now, why do I center that? There is also, in terms of how the transatlantic slave trading regime was all about changing 4 continents. It transformed Africa, it transformed Europe, Latin America, and and the North American continent. So it's not so much about the quantification, but paying attention to the processes of distribution and accumulation that have actually shaped how the capitalist economy itself has exerted influence on the entire globe, that it shaped how certain types of human beings would actually be traded on the global stage. The commodification of the black body becomes the center of capitalist growth. It's what frees up, that's what we saw in the documentary, that commodification was so influential in releasing the needed capital and industrialization that was happening in Great Britain.
So much has happened.
America, yeah. So I pay attention to those two processes of distribution and accumulation as lived realities of what have produced the capitalist.
All right. Just to bring you as well, Prof. Tembe, obviously it's a very significant time for South Africa. It's a G20 and quite a number of priorities. And what can South Africa do? Obviously, I mean, there's so much happening, from the squabbles with Donald Trump, and every day you wake up, there's a new tweet, and it's really hard to keep up. Prof, with your wisdom, what can South Africa do? Because this is a big deal for sub-Saharan Africa to have an event of this magnitude. The world focus will be on South Africa. Maybe the issue of reparations, Pretoria can try and push it. What can we do, Prof?
Thank you for your kind words. And I want to point out something within this panel. It is very rare that you sit in a panel where you all agree on something.
Bring the opposition, Prof.
But at the same time, what we are discussing also is perspectives. One main thing that we have to be careful about, when the frog is in the pot and the pot is boiling, it's not able to measure the temperature. And like crabs also in a bucket, they'll push each other back to the bucket and none will survive. Reparations in terms of monetary currency are symbolic. Even if it's 100,000 trillions, symbolic. Nothing can replace 500 years of dehumanization.
Oh, that deserves a round of applause.
Let us, because the burden of Africa, the burden of Global South resides in three spaces: the past, the present, and the future. We have to be careful of the burden. So as we transpose these temporalities, we run a risk of continuing the perpetuality of what happened. I don't need a continent or a global south that is a crybaby. Let us say we're celebrating the Mai Rebellion. I would like, or I would wish it to be celebrated from the perspective of it being a liberatory factor, without counting the bodies that fell. If we're celebrating June 16, let us talk about the linguistic paradigm shift from Afrikaans to English, not count the bodies that fell from the bullets of apartheid. So to the younger generation, I say the honors are on you to change the narrative. Let us talk about opportunism, where it all began. China had to leave the high seas. Thank you. In the 14th century, in 14th, 15th century, for Europe to have a chance to occupy those high seas. But when we learn at school, we learn about Henry the Navigator. Henry the Navigator is a baby. We had the Zhang Ho and other flotillas in the sea. We had the monsoon voyages from Africa to the Arabia. So a person that took that opportunity of the emptiness tells me one thing, that in my studies of cultural exchange and civilizational exchange, there is one thing in the world, and the world doesn't allow it. It's power. Politics don't allow a vacuum. Nature doesn't allow a vacuum. So beware when you're looking for reparations. Do you have the power? And what is that power? I think that's what you have to generate primarily. What is the power that you are going to put on the table when you talk about reparations? Don't repeat the cycle. There's a Gaussian curve in mathematics. This thing. There's a Gaussian curve. How many tails do you have in the growing of economy and money velocity? Be very careful. Yes, reparations are symbolic, but within that same time, let us establish a power upon which, not pity, not empathy, a power upon which you'll demand. Let me get a little bit crazy. I know people like this.
For sure.
If AI and all these new instruments of fourth industrial revolution really become a reality as they've become in the changed global trade, with some countries which were not in power becoming global powers, then let's repeat the game, let's dance again. At this time we know. Thank you very much.
Oh, well, you know what? Prof, that was really, really incredible because it speaks to the very evolving power dynamics, the shifting geopolitical environment from unipolar to multipolar. Molly, I'm coming back to you as a rose among the thorns. Obviously, it's still on the side there, but a critical question for you. Oftentimes, they talk about a new scramble for Africa. If you talk about artificial intelligence, we look at the cobalt, we look at the lithium, the Democratic Republic of Congo. But guess what? It's really in the state of disarray, highly divided. The eastern parts of Congo, the M23 has captured the shreds of territory. So there's so much division. Kinshasa is divided. Molly, how do we make sure that we see that economic sovereignty for Africa?
Okay, this is worrying because the new scramble for Africa is in full swing. Yeah, and it never stopped, sadly. It's just that it hibernated, but it continued because the whole political economy of the African continent never changed. You know, the periphery continued to support the metropole in the way the international, or rather the financial systems or even the trade regimes of the colonial, those that were colonized, the relationship between those who were colonized and the colonizer. And I'm sorry, Kaya, that I'm trying to be a bit historical before I answer. I just want to be a little bit historical and say, and make an example about Central Africa and West Africa, Francophone, and how 14 countries for decades never had their own central bank, even today. And they keep their money in the French treasury. When they want money, they must beg for their own money.
And what about the sovereignty of the states?
Exactly. Yeah, and this includes, I mean, a few years ago, the former Prime Minister of Italy said, because they were, annoyed by the migration and being at the fore, or rather being at the receiving end, thank you, of migration, they're the nearest to the seas. And, out of irritation, they said, France, please just stop. Just let them be, and, so that we won't have them come here and And that's basically it. So for me, that's where we also need to start, even before we discuss, because for me, the way forward, when we talk about the way forward, we must deal with the leakages. And for me, that's a leakage, because it means these countries will never have monetary sovereignty, let alone sovereignty. Actually, sovereignty does not even have a meaning for these countries. Also, military sovereignty. And that is why when we had those protests in Mali, you saw people, chasing the military. That has been present since its independence. And actually, so these countries, in the post-colonial era, they were forced to sign agreements, especially for mining or, access to the mineral resources. So it never stopped, especially for Francophone Africa. With us, it's different. Well, they can never be a better colonizer. Yeah, because it's still the same. The results are the same. It's just how they do it, and yeah, they still do it. We did not assimilate in terms of culture. We still have our surnames. You still have your name, Kaya, and you're proud. You didn't, we don't have that thing of wanting to be flying to Britain, marrying a British guy, or of course, if you love a British guy, it's fine. You can marry them.
Inclusion for sure.
Yes, we know. Yeah, but it's marry for love. Yeah, or so so for me, the new Scrabble for Africa, sadly, it's renewed, it's happening, but it's connected to what has been happening. So we really need a new paradigm shift, whatever we may call it, but we just need a new thing that will make an analysis of everything and use different tools of analysis and not be scared to use certain people. Karl Marx would say you must own the means of production. Like Professor Tembe was saying, what power do you have? So if you don't own the means of production, you have nothing to say on the table. And that's what we must work on nationally, locally, in order for us to deal with a new Scrabble for Africa, because that Scrabble continues. And sadly, Europe industrialized using coal. They have told us to stop using coal, even if we have discovered that there could be new just ways of using clean coal. The South African Department of Science and Technology has something, but it's ignored, because we're told to stop using coal, and yet we have deposits that can last us for the next 500 years. And by the way, the Congo River, and I'm glad you titled on the Congo, because for me, it's not even about the minerals of Congo. It's about the river in Congo, the second longest river, and maybe the second deepest, and it crisscrosses the equator twice. And in a rainy season, the velocity of the water that comes out of the Congo River to the Atlantic Ocean is amazing. The force that can electrify, we are told, if the Inga project can continue, in essence, the hydropower energy project, it could electrify the whole of sub-Saharan Africa, maybe even Europe. So we don't even need these mineral resources that Europe currently needs, or the Western world currently needs, because we have that river. If we can be integrated such that we work on that. But before, I don't know if I'll get another chance, but there's something I wanted to say about the alternatives. For me, we also need an alternative banking system, or rather, a different international financial institution that will counter the World Bank and counter the IMF. So I hope Brics, since we're in Brics TV Africa, we will be reminded that we need to bring those alternatives so that these African countries don't have to go back to the World Bank and IMF.
Well, Molly, that was quite powerful for sure. But Madalitso, coming back to you, we saw from the short film the issue of the global platforms you can approach. So there was quite a number of choices that you can approach. Do you think we can succeed? I mean, especially because these are very disruptive times. So much is happening in the globe. But do you think we can succeed in making sure that eventually those reparations do land in Africa, but also in the Caribbean islands? I know that Prime Minister Mia Mottley of Barbados, apart from being a champion of climate change, but she's been such one of those staunch and very, very formidable voices. Your thoughts on this?
Yeah, first and foremost, I don't believe in global institutions. For various reasons. I'm not just saying that as rhetoric or whatever, or to sound popular. One of the things is that today is the 4th of September, right? And that's when the Japanese actually surrendered in the Second World War, right? Interestingly enough, we tend to think about the war as if it started when Germany actually attacks Poland, but it started in China when Japan attacks China, right? Just a different version of history, right? So global institutions were not written, advanced, or thought about to include the rest of humanity. When the United Nations was actually formed 80 years ago, only 50 countries were represented, right? When, in 1945, when the war ends, the Second World War, that is, this is like really, really very interesting. I like this history. It's important. There were folk that came from the Spanish world and the Portuguese-speaking world, but there were no translators, right? So people were making decisions about the world, and they couldn't understand what was going on. Like just think about that, right? Now, I don't want to dwell too much on that. I think it's important, but those are the global institutions themselves are not inclusive from the first point of view. We look at whether it's talking about the International Bank of Settlements, whether it's the General Assembly or the Security Council, the World Bank, the IMF, in terms of how power has actually been structured. Now, it may, the P5 permanent, right? China, France, Russia, the United Kingdom, and I'm forgetting the other, the US.
Tariff. I almost said tariff.
Yeah. So, and then we have this so-called inclusive idea in the General Assembly, which is just like a puppet show, right? In one way or another. So, I tend to take a more critical view. There was an idea in the 20th century which animated most African anti-colonial nationalists in terms of remaking the world order. They understood that processes of slavery, colonialism, and empire were so central to the demarcation of the world. And hence we met in Bandung in 1955. Hence we met in Cuba in 1966, when Castro actually hosted a number of people that, came up with this concept of the tricontinental, the third international, right? Now, I'm not saying that we're going to go back to that era, but those were alternative imaginaries to what the world of empire could actually offer us, as folk that had come or been born outside of colonial violence. Now, it's very important that we pay attention to that, because for me, the Brics arrangement, as much as a lot of folk and commentators were talking about the reality that it's not challenging political power, but when you challenge economics, you're inadvertently challenging, political power, right? So we need to understand that whiteness exists as a totalizing regime that occupies all of human life, and it doesn't want to be decentered. These institutions have actually been preserved, produced to preserve the white life, to preserve what other political theorists have actually called the global racial contract. It continues to order the way we interact with one another, the way Africa is actually centered and viewed. And I disagree with my colleagues on one point, that I don't see Africa, right, as sub-Saharan Africa. To go back to Professor Tembe's point, that there was a pre-trans globalization that took place between the rest of the Sahara, with China, with India, that folk traded, right? They made sense. You have the movements of porcelain, of cloth, of ivory, all the way from the Sahel going to far places where Prof. Tembe has actually spent a larger part of his time in China. So that actually created new impetuses for institutions that were not predicated on domination. It was a pre-mercantile globalization that actually gave sense or made sense of institutions that we as folk could exist, trading empires across the African continent that actually transcend this idea of the Sahel and North Africa, etc. I tend to follow that historical development. So I think that is much more important. And then I think just the other point is that right now we're in a place where institutions are under existential threat. Yeah, we're celebrating like 80 years of the UN system, and it's not giving us anything. We have to be honest about that, right? I go to many global dialogues where they still believe in liberal internationalism, that it is the one internationalism that has the answers for us. I don't think most folk in the global south believe in that, right? In principle. In practice, it's a different reality. So I think we need to have those alternative imaginaries to the world of empire that has produced relations of coloniality, relations of violence, and continued forms of violence that we saw in the documentary, and to really challenge those patterns for 21st century international, for me, what I call a new humanism. And that has to bear in mind that Africa has to be the basis of the biolife.
I cannot agree with you more. Prof, bringing you here.
Sorry, can we just...
Oh, by all means. Prof, bringing you, whenever it's September, there's always a sense of excitement. The UN General Assembly, the leaders from the continent, right in Africa. Well, of course, others, they bring so many people. The barges get exhausted. But 80 years for the United Nations Security Council, the P5, the veto powers, it's still a big issue. And as far as I can remember, South Africa and many other countries in the continent, they've always been calling for that issue around reforms, for the UNSC to truly reflect the realities that you have. So much has happened from the World War II to Cold War to the very daily realities that we have through social media. So, Prof, what should be the main issue for the African leaders at the UN GA this year?
Thank you very much. In my first offering, I sort of put a paradigm. out there. And one point that I even ignored your question, apologies for that, I became a politician. I wanted to paint a specific picture that I will elaborate on, but I will come home. Madalitso, my great colleague, has given us the dots from Berlin Conference, Treaty of Versailles, the UN itself, which is failing today. Now there's a problem with this historical analysis. We may tend to sit in many events here and somewhere else in other global arenas, compiling a list of grievances. And then those lists of grievances are going to have a parallel, our own self-pity. And you need somebody to come and say, oh, call out the Lord, down, baby. Oh, I love Africa. One of the suggestions, returning to the point of power, most of my work that I'm doing now, I'm looking at a global paradigm shift, new center of powers. And the working word is fear of equality. That's why we come back to South Africa. We have a lot of that in South Africa. Fear of equality. South Africa has used its power, punching above its weight. Looking at this list of grievances, South Africa has been very courageous and has taken the initiative and has taken the punishment. But we still don't have a blueprint of establishing that power. We need a blueprint to have the power that even when we talk on platforms like this, we forget about those dots from slavery, colonialism, Berlin Conference, Treaty of Versailles, and so on. So what we can do as South Africa is to collaborate. Let's put ideas together. Let us stop this notion, Lusophone, Francophone, Anglophone. We are not.
Break the divides.
Unfortunately, what is going to confuse us is that itakuma amatimba yantamo akutamela tikuleri. Exactly that. I did that on purpose.
Prof.
Let me go on. Exactly that point. Kama tunajaribu kusema serikali ni nani lazima afanye rais, tunafuatilia system ile ya zamani. Therefore, we come back to this cocoon that was built for us in the Berlin Conference, because we can't even express ourselves from our intrinsic identity. We have to cross a river to explain. Of course, if you cross a river, you are in somebody else's territory and you have to explain, what the hell are you doing there? Sorry for my French. What are you doing on my side of the river? I'm not trying to be Diogo. No. I'm not trying to be Diogo. But at the same time, as we get rid, because the list of grievances, we have to get rid of it psychologically. Then we can address issues of Sahel. Because when you speak with a person of Sahel, you say, in the African Parliament, a Pan-African Parliament, it happens a lot. Let's vote. It's Francophone, Lusophone. On parle français. We speak English. Nós falamos português. We have to cross that river. In order to delete that list of grievances, our mind must come on our side of the river. But South Africa has started a good war. And let's not be unfair. Sahel, Mali, Burkina Faso, they've started a good war. And the difference is they are not apologetic about it. My last point. When you make a mistake, you self-correct. Otherwise, you'll perish. The 50, 60 years of African independence looked at reforming these institutions. Even if you come from the west of the DNAs, after 50 years, you learn the lesson. You learn the lesson. We've been not trying to self-correct ourselves. You cannot reform specific species and specific organism. So we have to take a total paradigm shift. And when you do that, there are no shortcuts. The very people or systems that controlled or still controlling Africa over 500 years, they themselves were the victims of certain systems for 300-400 years prior to that. They self-corrected. Let us self-correct. Thank you very much.
A very key theme. Of course, under the guidance of Ayanda, time-wise, we're still on track. He's my TD for tonight.
I think we've got more ideas and questions from the audience.
Very much so. So let's broaden the discussion. I'll try to see. I think I'm just as blind as a bat, but I'll try and, pretend as if I can see. All right. So let's see. Do we have a roving mic?
Thanks for that. My feeling is that Africans in the Caribbean diaspora is so reactive. You talk about equality, for an example. I always ask, who's equal to who? Who set the standard? That then we need to be, aspire to be equal to those. So why are we reactive? Yes, reparations has to happen, and looking at that, you can't say no. But without the plan, as you say, so China, how they took themselves out of the situation they were in 400 years ago. Yesterday I was watching their snippets of their parade. They're very unapologetic. Those were Chinese. There's no diversity there. It's Chinese doing what Chinese are doing. And the whole world is looking at that and saying, wow, we can't even do it here in South Africa. You can have a group of black people who speak Zulu, and then the white person comes in that discussion, they change. They change the tone, they change the way they have to behave. We have to switch from, speaking Zulu at that time to English. Those are the rivers that you have to cross. Now we have to pretend to be something else. I think what is happening in the Sahel, I'm not too experienced with that region, but I'm looking at what is happening there. I am so proud, of those folks there. And I think that they're probably showing the rest of the continent and the regions of the continent that, it's one thing to say there must be reparations, and they have to be. Those guys got a plan now. They're developing themselves. They're not asking for favors. It's not easy, yes, because they're being infiltrated. I mean, in South Africa, it's even worse. All this, the continent, all these powers used to have the expats, as they call them. They will send their people there to come and overlook again, just like they did in the 1800s. So they'll send their people who are managers, country managers. They don't have to do that. In South Africa, in fact, I've seen institutions in America and in France looking for people for free. Come and attend our course for free. So we still go to their schools. And we brag about that. And I've got, this certificate and this degree from Harvard. But you've been taught to come and manage other natives here. So what is the plan? You're right. Until this generation comes and say, yes, we're fighting for the land here in South Africa. We don't want to get it back. I always say to people, just, you and your family, put the money together, buy it. There's no land coming back. No. Politicians are lying to everybody. Don't want land back. You're not getting it back. Just buy it and do something with it. Well, take it. There are laws, they're going to arrest you. So just take the money and just say, where do we get the money? Like, but you've got umgidi every now and then. The money that you're taking to church, it's cheap. It's one of the biggest churches just signed an agreement with one of the biggest insurance companies. 4 million people, 7 billion they're going to be making every year. So black people, especially in this country, Africans, you do have resources. You do. But it's a mindset, it's a paradigm shift. And this thing of complaining, government must do this for us. And the Sahel, yeah, it's different. They have a government that is saying we have to start from scratch. In South Africa, we have infrastructure. Why are we complaining about government is not doing this for us? So it's a paradigm shift, sir. Thank you for that challenge, and I hope that message can reach a lot of people. Thank you.
Okay, now can I speak? I was just switching on the lights. So mine is to say, there was a challenge from the floor, I think it came from Prof, to say we need to challenge the youth in terms of how they think. So I always ask these questions in a public forum. How do we expect the youth to act when us, as adults, as the elderly, we are giving the youth different messages? Because when a judge fights with another judge, and a senior politician fights with another senior politician, what are we saying to the youth? Because we are giving them different messages, firstly. So who must they listen to if we are not even listening to ourselves? That's my number one question, right? And then, as South Africa, can I be respected? Jenny? MC, no. I was talking to Prof. Now we are, because now I'm not going to get my question. My second question is now, the world knows that we are not united as a country. Demonstrated by our president going to go big, I don't know what to go big, to the US thing. No. That's my opinion. I'm saying the world knows that we are divided as a country, right? Across racial lines, across social lines, etc. But more so now, across within us as black people, right? So when we go out there speaking to these nations, we are not speaking as a united voice as it was back in the days. We are fragmented. So we talk about in finance, we talk about arbitrage. You use this to gain this. They can pit us against one another because they know we are not speaking in one voice. Trade union fights against trade union. This fights against this. So how can we? So first question was the challenge to say, let's change how the youth thinks. How? Then the second question is saying, how will the world see us differently, take us seriously, if we are so divided? Is the question really not a dialogue about how we fix our own house first before we expect anybody else to see us any differently? Thank you.
Just now. But what I want to actually talk to is, I was born and bred in Johannesburg. I was born in 1972. So I have seen the good, the bad, and the ugly of Johannesburg.
Yeah.
And I want to use this symbol. I live in the leafy suburb of Johannesburg. One of the areas that are called the man-made forest. And for me, I don't take that for granted insofar as what I'm about to say right now is concerned. The people that planted those trees didn't enjoy what we enjoy today. So there's a lot that has gone wrong at this point in time. My question is, as this generation,
what are we doing to ensure that future generations have a better shade of what we plant today? We can blame ourselves for, like, there is, we go through as a country, as communities, as a Twitter community or whatever the case may be, we go into analysis paralysis. What is it that, as we're sitting here, are we going to do to plant forward? As an example, the people that are sitting here are sitting with so much information and knowledge, and what we are also blessed with as human beings, instead of consuming certain things that are not growing us in terms of knowing history and stuff like that. I was like I said earlier on, I was born in the 70s. I've got to see what it was like to go and buy. I come from a traveling family. Go and buy things from a window of a shop. And then that was in the 70s, 80s. And then in the 90s, I also experienced certain things. I also got privilege that other people didn't have. And here I am right now. The question is, what are we going to do to ensure that even our education system just says the history that we were taught, some of us, is not the history of what actually happened in terms of what all the speakers spoke about. And there are so many other people that, so the question is, what are we going to do with the history, with the pride that we have in terms of what this continent can bring, and everything else that goes with it? What is it that in this generation are we going to plant for future generations unselfishly? That's what I want to say. It's different from what I thought I was going to say.
Okay, maybe one more.
Yeah, about tennis.
One of the gentlemen that spoke earlier runs an agency called 15th of June. June 15th. We also know what happened in Egypt and what was then called, somebody remind me, the spring? Arab Spring. So I'm trying to connect all those points that says Brics TV Africa stands a good chance of spreading the message out to the youth that Prof is trying to reach.
Yeah.
Being on SABC TV or SABC Plus provides an opportunity to communicate the message. The documentary today is providing what I believe South African youth wants to hear. I look at the interest that people are taking in what Ibrahim Traore is doing. I look at the interest that is there between us as Africans and what our challenges are. And I say, a challenge is to you, Mr. Holo, to communicate the message. Because through a message that goes out, that gives the truth, that explains why we are who we are. I mean, our education system has made us believe that to have the knowledge about African history is nothing that should be achieved by the ordinary. You have to do certain things, extraordinary things. So excellence for an African child is seen as an exception rather than a rule. How do we make sure that communication channels, platforms like Brics Africa channel, deliver the education that starts to enrich and reduce this knowledge that's supposed to go to the ordinary and make them powerful. Because with that, we could see a revolution coming and bringing us the results that we want. We could be planting forward, as my beautiful wife said.
Oh.
Slash mentor, that I actually feel like I need to go back to school. Literally speaking. Because I was never the black child, and I'm going to say it like it is, that understood history what it is. And I feel like it was a little bit polished for me to literally understand ethics and what it actually means. And being in a platform like this for the first time ever, and I'm very thankful that I'm here with Brics Africa Channel as a young South African Black woman. I feel
That's powerful.
I feel very much empowered. I'm going back to the gentleman saying that we always feel that as that black child that you need to be at a certain level to understand the history of where we come from. But such platforms give us the opportunity. And I had to just say something. And I still think I'm the youngest here. I'm going to have it. So thank you very much.
Maybe it's my eloquence. One of the young authors that I mentor, she's written her third book now. She's written a book, and I mentioned that in my speech, that she says, the honors are on us. There is nothing we can tell the youth. It is the youth that have to forget our misgivings. We cannot tell the youth what to do. Because, like my daughter says sometimes, she says, Daddy, that was your time. Daddy, that was your time. On another shift, there is a saying that goes, we're the prisoners of our time. So as prisoners of our time, let us go back to that historical box and take the positives and give them where we can. In one of my books, 2020, I'm answering your question. I've got 2 chapters that interest me. I was young at the time, 2020. I started crying also, list of grievances. How do we heal a wounded nation? Yabadi, yabada. What happened to us? Yabadi, yabada. Where are our spaces? But by chapter 5, something happened. And it happened by accident. Like, you take a break from writing and you go back, and just like it happened to you, you wanted to talk, but you ended up talking positively, having forgotten what you wanted to say. But the most important thing you said, pass it forward. So chapter 5 of my book, I started writing about the African girl child. When I finished that, and exactly what you are saying, I was drawing pictures of what was done right. How can we pick that up? For example, this misconception that women don't have power. Brics Africa Channel is not a status quo channel. It's planting a new seed. The ground is fertile. Again, on answering your second question, all the people have a tendency of being senile. And it goes in stages. Some of the fights of a grandfather in a village, we pardon him because he's already old. Look at his life when he was building the clan. There is a tendency in the post-liberated Africa. I will say it in Zulu, but they will criticize me again. We have a tendency of focusing on the carcass. Carcass is already there by itself. Instead of focusing on the female cow that will breed other little cattle. It's only forecast. That's why I'm saying that we can't tell the youth anything. We can show them positive examples. That is why Pinky Maganye, the girl I'm talking about, that she's writing her that book, she says, the owners are not us, because she says, why during June 16 we should be told how many numbers were shot? Why don't we say that was a step to a revolution? Why is it when we talk about Sharpeville, we show bloodied bodies? Why is it, don't we say that we showed the regime that we were not numbers, we banned passes. From their organizations and the revolutionary zeal was born. We have to change perspective. Switch your channel, like Melanie Valente says. Switch your channel. Thank you very much.
On that note of switching the channels, let's hear from other panelists. Obviously, a lot of riveting perspectives from our very esteemed members here. Let's hear from you.
Yeah, there's many things that were spoken about, but I take seriously the idea of centering Africa
in global discussions. And a larger part of that is that we need to jettison what what many have coined as like forms of erasures, right? So we exist in this world. For those who already observed this, that the fact that we're here is because we have our ancestors who faced all these kinds of crimes, violences, violations, etc., and they were able to triumph and build, right? And they bequeathed something to all of us in one way. I don't mean it. You can interpret that in whatever way you want to look at it. And I think part of the central message that has been communicated for me when I revisit the archive is that the Black womb was so central in reimagining purpose and driving change, because it's the colonization of the womb that actually produces different races, right? But it also produces hope, right? So we are here because of that in essence. So I think outside of the regime that pushes us to think that we've been negated from history, those racialized as Black or African folk have always been building alternative communities. So I do a lot of work between comparisons between South Africa and Brazil. And one of the things that you see is this, the runaway slaves in the context of Brazil. They create the quilombos. The idea that you could actually have a new sense of living outside of the regime of what racialized violence has produced, right? So we've always existed outside of the realities that have made us to be on the margins. So I think it's important in terms of doing that. You look at the history of South Africa. When folks say we're not going to include you in the banking architecture, people created stokvels, and now who's actually going after those? It's the very same big four banks saying that we need, we gotta be able to, to take, it's highly capitalized, and then they want to police it, they want to control it, because or outside of that regime, people created businesses that worked, that functioned, that served the purposes of, of course it was not like a big class, but there were some people that saw those possibilities, right? And I mean, you go across even the Black diaspora in the States. They had the Black Wall Street, folk that were learning to fly, folk that ran airports, Black-led institutions. When we look at this narrative of creating or going against the grain to form institutions. There was a question around knowledge production. For me, I work in the university, and some of the courses that I teach now you could not imagine teaching those at that specific institution where I'm placed. Like bringing Afro-politics and religion is something I see that as agency, as increasing the visibilities of what African scholars have actually written about, and those who've actually been removed from the canon, from the archive, to be placed at the center of rethinking and reimagining, like the futures. So I think it also depends where we are in the value chain, right? Like we all have to see ourselves as being connected. And just lastly, I just want to say that there is also a sense in which this, when we speak about unity, right? I think most of the times it's like a false sense of unity, right? How many of us know that the world is actually controlled by 8 choke points? 8 military choke points, right?
For 8
Like,
billion people.
For 8 billion people. And South Africa possesses one, right? I like to talk about this because it's important.
We might lose
It's
it.
a very strategic country which has 2 oceans, which can actually control the maritime economy, which can influence global trade, can influence flows of knowledge, production, etc. Right? I don't want to mention the other choke points. I know them by name. I teach this to my kids every day when they wake up. Yes, they have to know. Yes. Yeah. So I'm saying, but we wallow in our problems. We create, narratives to doula. The problem is me, the foreigner. We hear that every day. Social media, the very same platforms that are meant to connect us and to push us forward, to create those transformative platforms, they become centers of exclusion. Instead of actually focusing on opportunities that are there in the world, that we can go against the grain of, racialized capitalism, like in part of my work and what I do. So I think, there is a need. There's always been folks that have been going against the grain, that have been rethinking Africa. They've just been marginalized. But now this is the time, and it's already happening, that people are hungry, and there's, the visibilities and possibilities for not only unity on the continent, but also thinking about the unification of the global Black diaspora, right? And there we have to center, what the former president used to speak about, like Haiti, right? The first Black republic that becomes central to thinking about freedom, that is sandwiched between 2 revolutions, the bourgeois revolutions of the United States and France, that are predicated on slavery, but Haiti gives us a different imagining about reordering colonial relations, political, business relations, and all of that. Yeah. So I think, I can go on and on, but
Hold just the last part for you before we wrap it up.
Oh, okay, quickly. Shenge spoke about China. 2 words for me for China. If we can, emulate the planning part, I think that's something we can learn. And succession planning also. Yes, and learn a bit maybe about the Cultural Revolution. Yes, and about how the strategy of the whole revolution, how it started in the villages, and then, gained support and momentum, so that when they entered the urban areas, they had the power from the villages. For me, and I'm glad that Shenge also mentioned the church. The numbers that we have in the churches, and how we can do certain things. For me, I will also add and see trade unions. Trade unions, including those monies, the pension funds, and the trade union investment companies. Okay. The second one, Sosiso said something about the youth. For me, my thoughts, Kaya, are that we should perhaps go back to the beginning, colonization, apartheid, the base, study Hendrik Verwoerd, what did he do? What damage did he do? What damage did 1652 do? And what is an antithesis to that thesis, to the colonial and the apartheid thesis? And I think we have not spent time building an antithesis to the thesis, because the larger part of the apartheid thesis was psychological, the social engineering that Hendrik Verwoerd designed. For me, the democratic dispensation focus more on bricks and mortar. How many houses do we need? How many streets do we need? How many? But we did not restore the soul. We did not restore the spirits. And Prof is correct to say the list of grievances, and I know we also have another list. We have there are people that were not buried in the Atlantic Ocean, the slaves. And I like when he says they change the narrative, because obviously we must say some fought, some threw themselves inside the water, but some were thrown inside the water, some were eaten by the sharks, but some fought when they arrived. Say the Igbo story of those that fought. So there is a narrative, but we should bury them. I don't think we've buried them. And I think we have also not buried those that died in the mines years ago in South Africa. Yes, they are buried, they're still buried underground, and we don't know their names. Those families that are affected would know. I guess in my family lineage I do have one, but many families never buried people and they died there. And we should have a funeral, a mass funeral, to respect them. We must give them flowers as part of this reparation. But for me, more importantly, we need to have that antithesis. Lindy spoke. Okay, Lindy's my sister. I come after her. The way forward. So for me, education system, you spoke about the history, the education system. I just, as I was sitting listening to you, I got reminded of the OBE. You know about the OBE, ne? Okay, so we took it from Australia, by the way. Yeah, outcome back. What? Yes. We took it from Australia, but it was designed from the US, apparently, for the Aborigines in Australia. So we took something that we don't know. Yes, we had no idea. We were too excited, and it goes back to build, to coming back and building, that antithesis. Our younger sister, who's 32 years old, spoke about that history, that is taught in schools, that is, not proper. One day I visited Uganda and I went to a bookshop called Plato, and I just went for 30 minutes, hoping to stay there for 30 minutes, and I stayed there for hours because I was shocked at how much of the history that the learners in Uganda were taught in high school, history about South Africa, that South Africa does not teach in South Africa. Yeah. And so for me, we didn't need to go to Australia. We could have gone to Uganda, or we could have gone to Zimbabwe. So perhaps we can redo that. Prof spoke about the African girl. He reminded me, the African girl child reminded me of Queen Zinga, the power that she had resisting the Portuguese colonies and colonizers rather. So we really need to change the narrative, like Prof is saying. So from me, that would be it. And Yeah, so thank you, Kaya. I think for me, the real takeaway is what Prof has been saying, the power. We just need to take back the power. We must not ask for permission, but we can't negotiate if we don't have the power. And we must stop making a list of grievances. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Mali. And I think that's just been the phrase of the night, the list of grievances. Stop with that. But obviously, you know what? We can go on until the wee hours of the morning. I'm afraid we have to stop right here. But of course, the panelists are still around here.